Hello everyone, welcome to the second instalment of our Transitions Out training. Throughout this session, we'll start by looking at therapy, so some information about therapy within students' final year at Swalcliffe, and then some information about therapy after Swalcliffe. We'll briefly look at benefits that may help support independence and pathways, some information about EHCPs and students' last annual review before they move on to another placement, and some information about general contacts and websites that might be helpful to you. I'm now going to share some information about therapy for students in their final year at Swalcliffe. Within students' final year at Swalcliffe, they'll continue to have access to the whole school therapy provision. This includes things such as the tutor program, the independence curriculum, liaisons with staff, and access to an adjusted environment and also specially trained teaching staff. If direct therapeutic support is appropriate for students, in their final year, this will look at things such as generalising any skills they've learned in therapy so far, teaching specific skills for their next steps or next placement, and developing strategies to support students to independently self-manage. Within their final year, the frequency of therapy may change, and this is to support the generalisation of skills, students' independence, and also to support students to become less reliant on therapy. Once your child is over 18, we will need consent for them to contact you and to share things such as therapeutic goals and progress. Therapy options for adults is limited, and most students will not meet the referral criteria for adult services across the various disciplines. We recommend that you begin having discussions with your child and their therapist about if they would like or need support after leaving Swalcliffe. Many young people do not feel comfortable disclosing their difficulties to others and may not want additional support at their next placement. Many of your children would have had consistent involvement from the therapy team over their time at Swalcliffe, so supporting them to let go of their dependence on their therapist and build confidence within themselves to self-manage is a big task. If your young person is planning to continue a placement that offers therapeutic support after Swalcliffe, it may be useful to consider if a break from therapy would be beneficial. Breaks are actually a very important part in the work done within therapy. They enable the young person to see that they can be self-sufficient and that they are not totally dependent on their therapist. They help young people to use other resources and to learn how to use peer support. If students know about the break in advance, it can help them to tune into their feelings and thoughts about it. We will support them to acknowledge how they're feeling about having a break from therapy. This way, the break itself, or more accurately, processing the break, can become a valuable part of their growth in therapy. If their future placement does not offer therapy, you can speak to the local authority about getting a personal budget to fund some additional therapy support. If after discussions with your young person or their therapist, it's decided that they will need to continue therapy after leaving Swalcliffe, however, they will not be attending a placement that offers therapy, this is something that you can share with any potential future placements. When placements are looking at if they can meet need, many of them will say they can't because there is no direct therapy support on site. If you speak with the placement before sending off your young person's EHCP and let them know that you will be speaking with the local authority about the potential of a personal budget to fund therapy, this can encourage them to consider the student for placement. However, if this is something that you're looking at doing, we recommend speaking to the local authority before contacting any colleges to get an idea of whether or not a personal budget is possible. Outside of any direct therapeutic support, all students are still entitled to reasonable adjustments within work, college, and university. I'm now going to share some information about therapy after Swalcliffe, looking specifically at speech and language therapy. Unfortunately, adult NHS services for speech and language therapy do not cater for social communication difficulties. If you, your therapist, and your child have agreed that they would need to continue with direct therapeutic support from speech and language therapist after Swalcliffe, you will need to talk to the local authority about how these needs can be met and how that therapy can be funded. If your child is not planning on accessing any therapeutic support relating to speech and language therapy after Swalcliffe, within their final year, their key worker and therapist can support them to develop a list of supports that they may need in their next placement that are considered reasonable adjustments. Within therapy and within their time in key working, they can then be supported to practice how to discuss these additional needs that they may have with their employer or next educational provider. We understand that leaving Swalcliffe and the social connections that our young people make at Swalcliffe can be very daunting. And when they graduate, it can be difficult to build up the same social network in their local area. We recommend that within their final year at Swalcliffe, you support your young person to build social networks in their local area. This may look like joining local clubs or sports teams, looking at the local offer and considering any support groups, encouraging friendships between your child and other children in the area of a similar age, attending open days at colleges or universities and encouraging social mingling at those events, and also getting a job in the local area. When we speak about the local area, this is the area where they'll be spending most of their time. So for students who are planning to attend university, their local area will be wherever they are attending uni. The local offer is a great place to find resources, clubs, and support groups. In your resources pack that's attached to these webinars, you'll find a document that links to all of the local authorities' local offers. Each website looks a little bit different and is navigated differently, but we recommend you start getting familiar with the websites and having a look at all of the various options available.
This slide will cover the area of clinical psychology provision in the final year at Swalcliffe, as well as what is available after leaving. If a student has been receiving direct clinical psychology provision, then a review of their potential ongoing needs will be covered within their last year at Swalcliffe. Therapy will often reduce in frequency to allow consolidation of developed skills and enhance independence. There are a number of different potential services that could support ongoing mental health needs after leaving Swalcliffe. It is important to note that even if students have been open to child and adolescent mental health services, they may not meet the criteria for transition to adult services. The criteria for these services is often guided by assessment around significant risk or impairments due to the individual's mental health difficulties. If the young person is prescribed medication, this may continue to be reviewed by an adult service, but may also be passed over to the GP for review. The Improving Access to Psychological Therapy Services, or IAPT, can offer mental health and therapeutic support for mild to moderate anxiety and depression-related difficulties. Different services may have a variety of different provisions available. This provision may include sessions with a psychological wellbeing practitioner, group sessions, counselling, or direct one-to-one cognitive behavioural therapy, for example. Other additional support and services can include national and local specialist autism and/or mental health services. You may also wish to pursue private provision with a clinical psychologist, or indeed a provider of a specific modality of therapy, such as a CBT therapist or an EMDR therapist with experience of working with autism, for example. There may also be other support through funding, such as NHS Continuing Healthcare or Social Care Act assessment, and these will be discussed later in the presentation.
Some young people may benefit from a transitions out report. This will be determined following an individual pupil's assessment and completed at the discretion of the treating therapist. What this transitions out report can include is things like OT provision that we feel the student may benefit from once they've left, or it could be some recommendations for if they go to university maybe, or if they're going on to college. So this could be extra time in exams, that type of thing. If you or your therapist and your child have agreed that they will need to continue OT after SPF, you will need to talk to your local authority about how these needs can be met. Obviously, the Transitions Out report can support this because we can give outcomes on there. If your child is not planning on accessing any additional OT support after SPF, their key worker and therapist can support them to develop a list of supports they may require within their next placement.
We're now going to talk you through benefits that may help support independence and pathways.
This slide will discuss continuing healthcare funding. NHS Continuing Healthcare Funding, or CHC, is a package of care funded by the NHS for anyone over the age of 18 who has what is identified as a primary health need. This means that the main reason for needed care is for healthcare reasons. CHC funding is available to meet an individual's health and associated social care needs that have arisen as a result of a disability, an accident, or an illness. This can include areas such as severe life-changing injuries from a road accident or other kind of accident, other significant health needs, or mental health needs. If the young adult's needs are identified as intense, complex, or unpredictable, they may demonstrate a primary health need and qualify for CHC funding. The first step to find out about eligibility for CHC funding is to have an initial assessment called a checklist. This is conducted by a nurse, a doctor, GP, social worker, or other qualified healthcare professional who carries out a brief evaluation of an individual's care needs. It can be requested at any time, but should be triggered, for example, when the individual is ready for discharge from a hospital, going into a care home, or if their mental health declines significantly. The checklist covers 11 areas of care, including cognition, mobility, continence, and breathing, against which the assessor evaluates the individual as having high, moderate, or low or no needs. It must be noted that the criteria for a positive checklist result, and therefore receiving a full assessment of need, are associated with a relatively high level of need and may not be appropriate for the young person. Please also see the link in the slide for a useful guide to this process. Another source of potential support is through a Care Act assessment. The Care Act 2014 is the law that explains what the local authority or council have to do to assess care needs and eligibility for care. It is useful to discuss with the local authority during the last year at Swalcliffe to ensure timely assessment, but this can be requested at any time. Social services have to assess an individual's care and support needs. The focus of the assessment is on well-being and independence. An individual's needs could include supported housing, employment, support at home, and social inclusion, or indeed other things. It is concerned with the provision of services to ensure crisis support is not required in the future, or to make sure that any difficulties do not deteriorate. All local authorities must use the same eligibility criteria. If an individual's eligible needs are not already being met, then the local authority is required to meet their needs. An individual can get social care support if they are over 18, are what's classed as ordinary resident of the local authority area, and meet the eligibility criteria. Anyone can ask the local authority for information and advice. They should provide information and care and support for the individual and anyone who cares for them. This information must include how social care services work, any costs and how to pay for services, how to get an assessment for social care and the eligibility criteria. It must also include other types of care and support in the area, how to get support and care, how to get money advice for any issues related to the individual's well-being, and who to tell if the person thinks someone else is at risk of harm. The local authority must make this information easy to find and use. If help is needed to understand the information provided, then the local authority can be asked to provide an advocate. An advocate can also help to communicate wishes to the local authority as well as attend meetings. There are standard eligibility criteria for all local authorities in England. An individual will be eligible if their needs are because of a physical or mental health issue, their need to stop them from being able to do 2 or more specific things, and there is a significant impact upon their well-being because they can't do specific things. The areas covered include getting out of the house, keeping in touch with friends and family, get a job or taking part in education, cleaning their house, preparing meals or going shopping, keeping safe, managing money, taking part in leisure activities, or contributing towards society, for example, through volunteering or being in a club or group. A social care need focuses on giving help with activities of daily living, personal independence, keeping in touch with friends and family, protection of vulnerable people, or access to a care home or supported housing. Please also see the link here on the slide for further information about this.
So now I'm going to talk to you about Employment and Support Allowance and Universal Credit. Employment and Support Allowance, ESA, is a benefit that some young people qualify for. It is a benefit for those that are considered unable to work. It can be applied for if your young person is still in full-time education, college or university. The student can qualify for contribution-based ESA. To qualify for the income-related ESA as a full-time student, the young person would also need to be receiving DLA or PIP. ESA is being phased out in some areas, and therefore individuals may now need to apply for Universal Credit. Universal Credit is a benefit that some young people can receive if you are disabled or have limited capability for work and are getting PIP or DLA or attendance allowance. So now I'm going to talk to you about PIP, Personal Independence Payment. PIP is a benefit that some young people may qualify for. You can get PIP whether you're working or not. You must be 16 or over and usually have not reached state pension age to claim it. You must also have a physical or mental health condition or a disability where you have experienced difficulties with daily living or getting around or both for 3 months, and you expect these difficulties to continue for at least 9 months. PIP is split into 2 parts, care and mobility, and your young person will have to apply and be assessed to see if they qualify. While during the part of this presentation we've been speaking to you about benefits and pathways, it is important to note that while we are highlighting these benefits to help support a young person, we are not benefit assessors or advisors and cannot say whether your young person will qualify for these benefits. Therefore, if you would like to explore whether your young person would be able to apply for these benefits, it is recommended that you seek support from a benefit advisor or those at the Citizen Advice Bureau.
Now we're going to share some information about education, health and care plans and the final annual review at Swalcliffe. The last annual review at Swalcliffe will look a bit different to annual reviews in previous years. The first thing to recognise is that the annual review might be at a different time to their regular annual review cycle. This is because the local authority need to finalise placements by the 31st of March and need time to contact future placements and see if they can meet need. Because of this, they need to know what pathways or placements the student is considering early on within the academic year. Very similar to all annual review meetings, part of the last annual review meeting will be reflecting on the student's final year and the years prior. An important part of this annual review will be discussing their plans for after Swalcliffe. Because this meeting is earlier in the academic year, most of the time placements will not be confirmed, so your young person will have a few options that we'll be discussing at the annual review meeting. When discussing these options, we will also be discussing whether or not the EHCP will need to be updated or whether or not it's being discontinued due to the pathway they chose. If you'd like further information on this, information is held within the first instalment of this webinar. If the EHCP is being continued, we, as usual, will discuss any changes that would be made to the EHCP. If a student is continuing on to a placement where their EHCP is continued, many of the outcomes and provision would need to be updated. It is important to get this balance right, as we do not want to add in so much provision that any future placements feel they cannot meet the need of your young person, but also need to ensure that the young person's needs are accurately reflected within their EHCP. Within this last annual review meeting, it is also important that we spend time speaking with the local authority about if any additional funding will be needed to access therapy. If your young person will need direct therapeutic support that is not offered by their future placement, you will need to speak with the local authority about ways to fund this. Each local authority works differently, and each future placement works differently as well. Some placements are happy to hire in therapists, but others are not. This is something to consider when looking at future placements.
The following slides will offer some information about a variety of organisations offering useful information and support. NHS choices. The Mix. Young Minds. Youth Access. Mind. Rethink. The National Autistic Society.
If you have any questions about anything presented today, please feel free to speak to your child's key worker or contact the Transitions Out team directly.